summarizes the article with boys and girls in mind, written by Gurian and Stevens. This article appears as issue 17 in their book, Taking Sides by James Noll. Issue 17 brings about the question, is there a crisis in the education of boys? Gurian and Stevens feel that the answer to this question is yes, there is a crisis. There are two major reasons for this crisis. One of these reasons is that there are structural differences in the brains of boys and girls. The effect these structural differences have on learning is that boys have strengths in spatial mechanical functioning and in math and physics. Girls, on the other hand, have strengths in verbal emotive functioning and reading and writing. These problems have led educators to the development of the nature-based approach. The second reason for that boys' education is in crisis is that schools have failed to meet the learning needs of boys. Since there was a huge emphasis on the education of girls in the 1990s, educators have been spending less time concentrating on boys' achievement. Boys are more likely to receive D's and F's, be diagnosed with learning disabilities, receive discipline referrals, and drop out of high school. Therefore, boys lag behind girls in most subjects, including verbal emotive functioning and reading and writing. This, too, has led to the development of the nature-based approach. The nature-based approach is a method where teachers are trained in the differences of learning styles between boys and girls. The nature-based classroom is a learning environment that is set up so that all learners can benefit.
Hello, my name is Nicole Tacker, and today I will be presenting the V diagram for Gurian and Stevens issue number 17, Is There a Crisis in the Education of Boys? From the book Taking Sides. Gurian and Stevens' article is entitled With Boys and Girls in Mind. So, let's start off with our focus question. Is there a gender crisis in education? Our event is assessing how the nature-based approach resolves the gender crises in education. Let's begin on the conceptual side. Key concepts are boys' education crisis, brains, structural differences, spatial mechanicking functioning, verbal emotive functioning, math, physics, primarily boys, reading and writing, girls, schools, low expectations, achievement statistics, and also the nature-based approach. Next, we have the principles. The nature-based approach utilizes the scientific differences in boys' and girls' brains so that gender-specific learning needs are met, specifically in areas of spatial mechanical orientation, which is primarily boys, and also verbal emotive orientation, primarily girls, and enables boys and girls to counter both physical and cultural predispositions. Our theory is the nature-based approach to teaching fully meets gender-specific needs and is the most beneficial approach long-term for both boys and girls. Lastly, the philosophy. Emphasis on both boys' and girls' needs and utilizing scientific and cultural research on gender reveals the need for gender-specific tactics inside the classroom. Now, let's move over to the methodological side. Here are the records which enforce the principles, as quoted from the book. Number 1, our schools, structurally and functionally, do not fulfill gender-specific needs, and this is particularly harmful to boys. Number 2, look inside the brains of boys and girls, where we find structural and functional differences that profoundly affect human learning. Number 3, the nature-based approach calls attention to the importance of basing human attachment and education strategies on research-driven biological understanding. Okay, so we're on to transformations, which is a brief summary. Gender differences in neuroscience, suppressive stereotypes, cultural expectations, achievement or lack of by gender, and the structural functional methods of schools each contribute to the detriment of students in regards to gender in the classroom, particularly for boys. Knowledge claims. Structural differences in boys' and girls' brains, cultural gender expectations and stereotypes, statistics and studies on gender achievement, all point to the need for gender-specific strategies of the nature-based approach. And finally, value claims. In light of numerous significant gender differences, the nature-based approach give the most beneficial and accommodating learning experience for both boys and girls. So, in conclusion, there is a gender crisis in education on account of the fact that schools and teachers do not work to meet gender-specific needs in learning, which is essential for many cultural and long-term reasons, but most importantly, it is essential because boys and girls' brains work very differently. So, the nature-based approach emphasizes how to help those boys and girls learn in ways that accommodate their different needs. Well, the nature-based approach is just a broad term of teachers being trained how boys and girls learn differently and applying it in the classroom rather than how it is now where we kind of just lump everyone together and sort of ignore it. As they discussed also that boys are cortically trained, like there's a trend in their brains that points them to spatial and mechanical functioning and the need to move. You know, they pay attention better if they can move. So even little things like having activities where the boys can move about the room, or the book suggests like a building blocks area where they can build and discuss what they're building, and that helps them work on the skills that most of us struggle with, like speaking, vocabulary, making their feelings known. Does that help, or is there more?
Also, part of the nature-based approach is that teachers learn about how to design their classroom to accommodate everyone's needs. So, like for the boys, there would be more physical, more space for learning and stuff like that, like what Nicole said about blocks. And then girls would have more opportunities to manipulate objects, and so that's to compensate for spatial challenges.
How does Sarah?
Are a little older, but 80% of high school dropouts are male. 90% of discipline referrals are made up of boys. 2/3 of students that are diagnosed with learning disabilities are boys. That's 2/3. Boys earn 70% of D's and F's and fewer than half of the A's. And obviously there's exceptions to every rule, but that just undeniably
Okay. What if we ask a simple one?
This is also true, but at the same time, we know for a fact, literally by brain scans and just observing classrooms, that boys and girls learn differently. Why not, as teachers, utilize that, and play upon those strengths or weaknesses and help them to build.
So you're saying it's.
I think for some subjects it might be beneficial, but I don't think that they should be in separate classrooms.
Nicole, what would you do?
You can still have them together, but maybe certain activities, maybe having the boys and girls separate, but that might not be necessary. You just want to make sure you cater to the needs.
Okay.
And our article says yes, and that schools have failed to meet gender-specific needs, and girls and boys learn differently. And the nature-based approach trains teachers to accommodate to the differences so that everyone has an opportunity to succeed in the classroom. But our article also says that there's a gender education crisis of boys, but also in girls. It just affects the boys more than it affects the girls.
All right, thank you. Moving on to Nicole, same thing. You get a okay at 30 seconds.
And yes, it does affect girls as well, as far as, there's probably a lot of girls in here who don't like math and science. That's the general stereotype. But it's also kind of true, because the way girls' brains work, it's verbal, emotive focus, and boys are spatial mechanical. So, in other words, we just need to work on helping boys and girls learn the way that their brains function. And then, since there are predispositions in your brain, help boys and encourage them to discuss their feelings and to do activities where they're writing and speaking, not just math and number oriented. Emphasize those things. And yes, that race is a factor as well, but we might as well use this information to help teach our students in a more effective way.